Good evening. Good evening, welcome. My name is Kanan Galati. I'm the CEO and chairman of the Times Publishing Company, and I'm so thrilled to have such a large crowd here with us for a very important topic. Tonight, we are very excited to have this discussion about farm to table, how food can help a healthy community thrive. The Times Publishing Company has covered food and the food industry for a long period of time. In fact, we have more than doubled down on our food coverage. And many of you know us for coverage of fine dining and restaurants around the Tampa Bay area. But it's more than just that. It's about where our food comes from, those sources, the places that food is grown, how it gets from the farm to the tables where we eat, whether that's out in a restaurant or in our homes. And we feel like it's important to cover that topic because it brings us all together. Food is a natural unifier for us all, whether it is just to nourish our bodies, but also culturally brings us to tables to have discussions with each other. It's so very important. I actually have a great theory about this. I don't know if it's great. I'm just going to try it on you. My theory is that there's a distinct connection between journalism and food. Okay, follow me. This is going somewhere. First, local is better, right? Oh, you with me on this? Right? Good local food, good local journalism. For those of you that support local journalism, thank you. For those of you that support our local farms, thank you. We really appreciate that. The second part of it is that everyone deserves it, right? Good local journalism is deserved in every one of our neighborhoods. Good, healthy food choices are deserved in every part of our community. And thank you. And the third part of the theory is this, is that there's a lot of stuff out there, right? There's a lot of what would be called food out there. There's a lot of what would be called information and news-ish kind of information out there. So quality matters, right? Knowing what your source is, where does it come from? Who's growing it? Who's creating it? Do you trust the people that start the process and eventually bring it to you? Because you can fill up on a lot of unhealthy things, whether it's food or what you consume. So as someone who's spent their entire career in local journalism, I appreciate you caring about this topic tonight, and hopefully you agree with my analogy that it matters what we put in our bodies, it matters where that comes from, so there's a great connection between good information and good sources of our food. We have a wonderful conversation lined up for you tonight, but I want to make a quick shout of thanks. The people that you met when you came in the door, that checked you in, that registered you, those are all part of our Times team, and they make themselves available to make this possible. Please, let's give them a round of applause. And of course, events like this would not be possible without our wonderful sponsor, Foundation for a Healthy St. Pete. The foundation has helped us carry many of these conversations on all kinds of topics and has opened their doors, literally, to us to have this venue here with all of our wonderful partners. Hopefully you'll be able to sample some of the food and drinks that they've provided tonight. What a great setting this is, and we can't thank the foundation enough for their support in our Spotlight series, a series meant to elevate the level of debate in our community on the most important topics. Let's take a moment to watch a short video about the foundation and its great work.
At the foundation, we know that optimal health outcomes and well-being should be an attainable reality for all of us, regardless of our race, regardless of our ethnicity, our gender, geography, or income. We also know that all too often this just is not the case. So we are working to advance racially equitable health outcomes in our community by improving the systems and conditions that shape them. We do this work through 4 primary pathways. We lead, fund, partner, and advocate. We are working to create equitable opportunities for all of us. This is the data. This is the truth. This is our work. No one can do this work alone. It takes a full ecosystem of support, and we are all a part of that ecosystem. Now that we know better, it's time for us to do better. So let's do so together.
round of applause for the wonderful foundation. And here to say more about the foundation and its work is Marcus Brooks, Chief Impact Officer. Marcus.
Good evening. I'm gonna try it again. Good evening. Good evening, good evening, good evening. So grateful to be sharing space with you all this evening. I have the pleasure and privilege of welcoming you all to the Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg Center for Health Equity. Again, my name is Marcus Brooks, and I serve as the Chief Impact Officer here in our community, but also here at the Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg. Before we get going, I just want to quickly acknowledge the Foundation staff in the space. If you could just raise your hands, we are so grateful for the team of folks that come together to bring this stuff. So yes, shout out you all. I also want to quickly shout out one of our board of trustees, our board member, Dr. Kenneth Bryant, who's been a staple in this community for many, many years. So just shout out to you. Thank you for being here and sharing space with us as well. And then last but certainly not least, I want to shout you all out for showing up and being a part of tonight's conversation. So give yourselves a round of applause. So we understand that the foods we eat nurture us. They have the power to fill our bodies and prepare us for another day. They can help us grow strong and stay healthy, but only if we are able to access them, only if we're able to afford them, and only if we have the resources to prepare them. Food is fundamental to our health, and as you all heard in the video, our vision at the Foundation is to create a community in which good health allows all people to thrive. Our community is thriving in so many ways, and we do not miss that. However, we can look at the health outcomes in our community, and they are plagued by significant disparities along the lines of race and geography. We know that about 80% of our health outcomes are shaped not by the medical care that we receive in crisis, but by the everyday circumstances of our lives, meaning the conditions in which we live, the social determinants of health, where we work, we learn, we play, and we age. So that is where the Foundation for a Healthy St. Pete targets our work. We offer thought leadership, funding, partnership, and advocacy to improve the social conditions that shape our collective health. Tonight's gathering is part of those efforts. The panelists you'll hear from this evening are leaders in our local food system, and we are grateful for their contributions. They help produce food. They help distribute it. They put it on the tables of families throughout our area. They also offer thought leadership on how to make our local food system stronger, more resilient, and more accessible for the people who call this community home. So yes, tonight is about food, but it's also about more than that. Because when we think about food and its relationship to our health, we also have to think about the economic stability of our local residents. Ask the questions, can all of our community members reliably afford the foods we need to nourish us? We have to think about these things: geography, transportation, and time, things that we take for granted. The environment that surrounds us, what kinds of foods can we find close to the places we work, live, and grow? If we're not asking ourselves these questions, we are doing a disservice not only to ourselves as individuals, but to the communities in which we take part in. So tonight, we've come together to talk about the future we want for our community. One that ensures that everyone who lives here has access to the resources they need to thrive, starting with a healthy food system. And let us be honest, we are not going to solve all the world's problems tonight. We will not leave this room with it all figured out. And as much as I'd love to, we won't walk away from this evening with the answers, all the next steps, a concrete, actionable roadmap or plan to a healthier future for our community. But we may walk away with some of it. Hopefully, we'll leave this building with a better understanding of what goes into creating our local food system and how we might make it stronger, more resilient, more accessible for the people who live here. We also hopefully walk away with ideas of what does it look like to have a thriving community. Your voices and your thoughts matter. So I'm glad you came out to be a part of this, and that's exactly why I forced you to give yourselves a round of applause, because we have work to do. I hope that we all leave feeling nourished by the dialogue that will unfold tonight. Thank you to the incredible vendors. Shout them out, give them a round of applause. These people are more than just vendors. They are doing some really difficult, challenging, impactful work every day. And while they show up to us at vendor tables, sharing the information that they have for you, It is not easy, and so we owe it to them to ensure that we are continuously engaging in the great work that they're doing. Now, it's my pleasure to turn tonight's conversation over to the Tampa Bay Times food and dining editor, Michelle Stark. Michelle leads the Times Food Hub and will serve as our moderator for this evening, introducing you to a wonderful panel of growers, community leaders, and local residents to discuss how Tampa Bay's food system connects to every facet of our daily lives. From which foods are available to us to how much they cost, and what we can do to make the system strong. Take it away, Michelle.
Thank you, Marcus. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I'm so thrilled to see so many people. This is my first time moderating a spotlight panel, and this feels like a really great turnout to me. So kudos to you all once again. Before I introduce our great panel, I'm going to go through a couple housekeeping things. We're going to chat for about an hour, and then we're going to take your questions. So if you did not get a question card on your way in, or if you have more that you would like to ask, just raise your hand throughout the panel, and someone from our staff will come around and give you a pen and a piece of paper, and then we'll collect those at a certain point, deliver them to me, and I'll ask the folks up here. I think that's all the housekeeping I have. On to this great panel. So first, directly to my right, we have Jen Yeagley. Jen is currently the CEO of the St. Pete Free Clinic. She's got over 20 years of experience in human services. Under her leadership, the clinic has more than tripled the number of individuals served and expanded its reach across Pinellas County. Welcome, Jen. Thanks for being here. Next to her, we have Reverend Howard Gunn Jr. He is the co-founder of the Florida Black Farmers and Agriculturalists Association, also the executive director of Sustaining Environments Through Education and Economic Development. In 2003-2004, he helped secure millions of dollars from the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture for underserved farmers. Next, we've got Monica Petrella, the Food System Program Coordinator for UF IFAS Extension Hillsborough County. I hope I got that order right. In 2002, she launched Homegrown Hillsborough, a network for community organizations engaged in food system work that currently serves over 300 members. And last but certainly not least, I think a lot of you folks in the room probably know Emmanuel. Manuel Rue is the founder of 15th Street Farms, an organic vegetable farm in St. Pete that's been around for about 15 years. He manages gardens in 15 schools and promotes the creation of community and home gardens across the region. Thanks so much for being here, guys. We're going to start with Monica. As someone who has a bit of a unique vantage point of seeing how all the webs are connected in this space, I wanted to just start with like a very basic definition of what is a food. When we say the word food system, what are we even talking about?
Yeah, that's a great starting point. So the way that we define a food system in Homegrown Hillsborough is all of the processes and infrastructure involved in feeding a community. And so, processes, the things that flow, and the infrastructure, the built things that you need to feed your community. So you can decide if your community is your household or your zip code or your neighborhood. In Homegrown Hillsborough, we have our community as Hillsborough County. And the way that we talk about the food system is through 6 sectors. So the sectors are production, growing food; processing, which is turning it into more edible forms. So that's taking an eggplant and turning it into baba ganoush. After that, we have distribution, which is how food gets around our community. So that's like refrigerated trucks, driving food from either the farm or distributor to its next location, which is where marketing happens, where you exchange dollars for food. After that, we talk about consumption, and consumption is where both health and wellness kind of play a part, but also where culture comes in. And then lastly, we have resource management, which is the recycling and the management of the resources that it takes to then produce, process, distribute, market, consume, and keep it going. So we paint a picture of the food system as a cycle, a cyclical, ideally kind of self-fulfilling cycle in which we are, managing those resources wisely in order to keep it going.
Yeah, I think you very astutely observed in one of our pre-conversations that all of you on this panel seem to represent a particular part of that cycle. And I think Howard especially could speak to the production part of it. As someone who has spent decades working in agriculture and with farmers, how important is it to understand that foundation of where our food comes from?
Thank you very much. Say good evening to everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. How many farmers do we have in the audience? How many want to be farmers? How many is concerned about where your food comes from? Okay, good. We all should be. As a farmer, first thing we're concerned with is how the food gets to the table, farm to table. What is the process? Does it leave the farm and goes directly to the stores, or does it leave the farm and someone comes to the farm or either buy it that way? It is important that we know exactly where the food is coming from. 10 days on the road, 15 days on the road to the grocery store is when you begin to see where your food is coming from. We, as farmers, we have a hard time trying to convince the public that your food is your wealth. Your health is your wealth. You can have all the money in the world and not have good health. You're still broke. So when we say that, we want you to know the systems that occurs. First of all, the food is grown. What is put on the food to get it to you the quickest? Can I grow my cattle quick enough before the other farmer grows his cattle? I can. I can use different chemicals. I can use different types of things to grow that cow, just as I can with that plant. I can put super fertilizer on that plant, but does that benefit you? Are you concerned about that? Or you just go to the public stores or the regular stores and not even asking the butcher where the food comes from? It is important that we know the farmer and know your food. Know your food, know your farmer. Now, it's not always expedient for us to do this, but if you're so concerned about your health, matter of fact, we don't live to eat, we eat to live. I think some of us have that misconception that we think that we should just live to eat. No, some things you don't want to eat, okay? Because it's not nourishing. The pharmaceutical companies, the insurance company, and I know that maybe some doctors here, okay? These people are working not for your best advantage at that time. Cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, heart attacks are all preventable diseases. It's based on what you're eating. But if you are going to eat that way, then you are going to end up paying the price for it. My wife will tell you, I'm very cautious. If I don't grow it, I don't hardly eat it. Processed food is not always good. It's very convenient, but it's not always good for you. We want food that is nutrient dense, something that I'm going to get out of this food, not something that's been stripped of all the nutrients, but is a filler. You can get calories from a Coca-Cola, but it's those healthy calories. We have to start educating ourselves about what is happening with the food systems. And as I can go in on this, my first organic food was probably with my grandmothers growing up in Mississippi, my great-grandmother and my grandmother. We would have the chickens. Some of you might remember visiting your granny and eating the pies that she had put up and used there. Some of you gone back that far that you can remember that. But we would eat the chicken that she grew on the farm. Wasn't any chemicals in that chicken. Wasn't any hormones in that chicken. I can grow a chicken in 20 days now, and you can eat it in those 20 days based on the knowledge that I know how to grow. Now, is that healthy or is that good for you? Or does that chicken have a time to be free range? How many eat free range chicken only? Is there anyone? No, we don't, because we're not just that concerned about our health. I could go on and on with agriculture. The United States is the biggest agriculture producer in the world. We can produce more food. We can feed our army. We can feed our people. Now, it is estimated that by 2050, the population will have increased to 40% in the world. There's 9 billion people in the world today. How do we have systems in place to feed these people? That's where the farmer comes in. But when and I'm going to stop here.
All right, that was great, and we'll definitely come back to you at a certain point. Emmanuel, kind of, riffing off that idea of having the knowledge to grow, your mission statement at 15th Street Farms includes this idea that you facilitate learning and community building. How important is that to connecting all the pieces needed to make a healthy food system?
It's very simple. You are what you eat. And not only you are what you eat, you're what you eat has eaten.
Okay.
So you cannot grow healthy food on sick soil, just the same way that you cannot feel healthy when you're sick. And what works in agriculture with chemical and conventional chemical-based agriculture is the same thing as for athletes that take performance-enhancing drugs. They work. However, there is a price to pay. And we have to be, now those prices are becoming apparent. And we are, I think, at an inflection point where a lot of things are going to change because we are facing situations that are absolutely unsustainable.
Jennifer, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the work you're doing at the St. Pete Free Clinic. Something you all sort of mentioned when we talked previously was this idea that like the pandemic sort of heightened all these insecurities within the system, and the volume of what you've been seeing in terms of people in need and people coming to you has really drastically ramped up in the past couple years because of that. Can you talk about how you're serving that community and how that sort of plays into the system at large?
Thank you. So we definitely at the St. Pete Free Clinic represent a different aspect in the food system than my colleagues. Our role is essentially to make sure that we are able to source food in bulk as we can, and then be able to distribute that through a collaborative network across the county. And pre-COVID, many of you are familiar with our downtown We Help Indoor Choice Fresh Pantry. Pre-COVID, we served about 170 families per day at that site on a busy day, which equated to about 6,000 people per month. When the pandemic happened, almost overnight, because of furloughs, because of people maybe temporarily losing their job, their income, all the factors that we all faced, overnight we went from serving about 6,000 people per month to about 20,000 people per month on average, which none of us knew to anticipate that. But to your point, it highlighted that we had a lot of food insecurity in our community pre-pandemic. And a lot of what we heard from the neighbors that we spoke to who were coming through our drive-through, because we moved outside to keep people safe. Many of you probably got caught in the traffic around our building with our apologies. We're back inside, so that has abated. But when we were speaking to folks, they were letting us know things like, we could have really used some help before the pandemic, and we didn't know we could come here. And so part of what the pandemic did for us was to really promote that we were there and that we were accessible, that the food we were providing was nutritious, and people were going to be served with dignity and respect. So in 2022, we moved back inside from our drive-through, and when we surveyed the individuals we were serving, we learned that about half of them really liked the ease and convenience of drive-through, and about half of them really wanted to go back to that indoor choice model, like you're shopping at a store, can make your own selections and not paying anything for it. So we thought, great, we'll open up 2 drive-throughs, we'll reopen our indoor choice pantry, and we will be able to stay level with serving our 20,000 neighbors per month, which is where we were averaging. We moved inside and reopened the 2 drive-thrus June of 2022. By August of 2022, we were serving 40,000 visitors monthly across those 3 locations, which has barely dissipated in the last 4 years. And so again, what we're seeing is just cracks in the food security system that are exacerbated by all of the other economic conditions that we see happening around us or that many of us are experiencing. So we see increased cost of living, our high housing prices, increased utility costs, all of these pressures, grocery costs and the persistence of the unaffordability of groceries for many, all of those things work together to just create a lot of insecurity in our economic system in general, with food and groceries kind of being central to that because everybody needs to eat multiple times a day, ideally, all the time. And so again, you know, there was a lot of food insecurity pre-pandemic. It has not remotely been abated, and we're still really, there's so many of our neighbors out there that are struggling with affordability, access, nutrition, all of the things that we're trying to address on a daily basis.
Yeah, inherent in a successful food system seems to be this tension of feeding people in need, hopefully healthy food, while also trying to grow the infrastructure around them and potentially educate them so that they could, you know, start farming themselves or sourcing this food themselves. The idea of like giving a person a fish versus teaching them how to fish. I'm curious what each of you think about that concept and sort of how you go about tackling that like day to day in your work.
So I can start. So Homegrown Hillsborough ultimately is a leadership and professional development network. And so there are a lot of people out in the world right now that want to take action and promote a better future for their community. And so there are community leaders that through the pandemic before, but the pandemic really did kind of heighten it, they said, I want to do something to make a change. And so whether that is teaching kids how to grow their own food or starting a community compost station or trying to donate their extra food to someone in need, there's some way that they wanted to say, like, I want to put effort into doing an action that can have a ripple effect throughout my community. But what that largely looks like is like starting a nonprofit and or joining, an existing group. And community networks can be really hard. They're really rewarding. And as like the video that we watched says, like it does take action from all sides. It can't be an individual effort. It can't even be an individual institution, even if it's the best funded, organization in the world with a staff of 300. And still, that is not the same reach as when you have community leaders from their own pockets come together and bond around a common idea. And so for us in Homegrown Hillsborough, I help work with community leaders, develop their leadership, and a lot of what leadership is identifying the next leader and the next one and the next one, so that way everyone sees themselves as a leader. And so in community organizing, you're often told that the goal is to organize yourself out of the job. So you can come and provide assistance, but ideally you are empowering someone to where they don't need that service from you or the provider. And so that's what we're trying to do with community leadership, specifically in the food system space. And so it really is that teach a person how to fish, teach a person how to be a leader. And what that can look like is member management, how to have good meetings, how to fundraise, how to acquire liability insurance, how to do an elevator pitch, all types of things. But that is how we ultimately teach people how to fish.
Yeah, I think education is the key. The 4-H, the FFAs, with the grandchildren and the children, if they get started there, they're going to go forward with knowing the importance of agriculture. If we wait to train them, they won't know anything about it. We have a program that we do in the Jacksonville school systems where we actually go in and we take in tons of food to the first and third graders. Then we'll have a taste test, and then we give them a bag of food to take home. Some of the children are not aware of where the food is grown, above ground or below ground. Where is the apple grown? Is it above ground or below? This is basic to us, but it's not to those children. So the education component must be there if we're going to be successful in agriculture. The things that we concern ourselves with is soil, air, and water. And here in Florida, the water problem will continue to increase, the availability of water. So these are important things that we must educate our children on. And for our seniors like myself, we have to eat better. There's no doubt about it. We just have to eat better. Not eating everything, but eating healthy, wholesome food. Doesn't have to be straight from the farm, but it has to be wholesome. Wholesome means that it's not going to spoil on you when you take it home. The vegetable is going to have at least 3 to 4 daylight hours on it versus getting second and third vegetables, which will spoil before you take them home. So you got to be cautious that people will feed you anything. I'll just leave it at that.
Jump in. Well, dueling microphones here, Emmanuel. What we recognize at St. Pete Free Clinic is that it has to be a both and. So we believe strongly that we need, farms, producing farms, and urban agriculture, and fruit trees that everybody can eat off of, and affordable grocery, and community co-op. All of these things, ideally, in an ideal functioning food secure community, all of these things exist such that the free clinic wouldn't have to necessarily, but the pantry might be there, but wouldn't be needed in such volume or quite so much need. The role that we play is to fill that gap for now, while all of these systems are catching up, while the economy hopefully is shifting, while systems, can be impacted to ultimately reduce the need for places like food banks and food pantries. But in the meantime, and while that need is there, we want to fill that role so that nobody is worrying about where their next meal is coming from. And to your point about nutrient-dense food, as a health organization, we were founded as a health clinic that grew into food security work. Right now, 86% of the food that we distribute through our food bank and also in our food pantry is healthy. It's produce, healthy protein, healthy shelf-stable food like brown rice and black beans, as well as dairy. And so we really try to provide that diversity of food, but make sure that it is as nutritious as possible so that we're supporting our community's health while we're also making sure that we're reducing food insecurity.
I guess that's why the community... Go ahead.
I would like to put things in perspective. Tampa Bay has about a population of 3 million people. Each one of us, according to the SDA, spends an average of $3,000 and something. Lately it has been increasing. So if you make the calculation, that's between $10 and $12 billion a year of food that is spent in the community. 99.9% comes from the global food system. The local food system that starts with some of us that grow a basil plant on our windowsill, to urban and peri-urban farms. Peri-urban farms are the farms like yours, Reverend Howard, who are within 50 miles. We have a tremendous potential to expand. And it is going to happen because of the problems, the geopolitical problems we're facing with the chemical residues and the poisons that are spread on our food. I've never met a scientist who could explain to me when did the toxic chemicals that are delivered to the farms with skull and bones on the label evaporate between they get to our plates. So there is a number of factors that are coming into play. And we have an opportunity as a community, and according to the SDA, Tampa Bay is one of the only large markets in the country that does not have a really organized local food system. So if we set as an objective for the next 10 years, 5 years, whatever, to grow only 2%, to spend 2% of those $10 to $12 billion, that is a lot of money. So what we need to do is to support local farms and to speak and to make our voices as consumers known to the policymakers, to look at local food system as an economic low-hanging fruit. And they are starting to do that. I've had the opportunity to do a couple presentations to the Regional Planning Commission. That's 27 governments. they are starting to see it. If I was a manufacturer of washing machines and coming to say that I'm going to produce $200 million worth of washing machines, they would roll the red carpet for me. 70% of manufacturing dollars go to Mexico, China, wherever. Urban agriculture and local food system would keep 89% of those dollars within the community, and those dollars are then multiplied, depending on which economist you talk to, 7 times, some say up to 30 times. So the economic impact is enormous. And that is only going to be possible, as Reverend Howard said, and Monica mentioned, is to create that awareness among the consumers and create the demand for it for a number of reasons.
And while I very much do agree with that, I do think it is important to recognize that like economies of scale are a real thing, and that is one of the things that the current industrial food system has done really well is make food cheap. And so one of like the banners of the industrial food system is that food is abundant, safe, and cheap. And those things are largely true. If I wanted to shift my spending to 2% local, it actually isn't easy. It's requiring you to have to go to a farm stand or a farmer's market or a retail store that sells it, which are few and far between. And so that's why in the definition of a food system, it's the processes and the infrastructure. And so awareness is a huge first part, because that's ultimately what's gonna like fuel that consumer demand. But we do need to build local supply chains that are for a local food system. And in Homegrown Hillsborough, we actually try to use the term community food system over local food system, because local is a radius. It also doesn't communicate values. And so to the extent that like Florida is a major agriculture state. And so a lot of stuff that we all get through the restaurants, through the grocery stores, wherever we're going, actually is grown in Florida because we grow a lot of stuff here. But I don't think that's necessarily hitting the mark of what maybe you're envisioning when you're saying to support local produce. So Hillsborough County is a strawberry county. It's $300 million a year. That's a huge economic engine for our county. But with that being said, I don't think it's the same vision of that community food system that has its values in education, outreach, awareness, equity, health, all of those things. Ultimately, Hillsborough County strawberry growers are trying to grow the most strawberries to sell up the eastern seaboard. That is their goal. And so that's kind of why we differentiate between local and community, because we have local farmers in Florida because we are a big agricultural state. So everywhere we go, there are farmers there. But we might not have thriving community-based food systems here.
I think that you're pointing out something interesting. Those farmers, those strawberries farmers are local, but they are part of the global food system, and that is totally different. So,
right. And I completely agree with that. Yeah.
And you know, again, with the education component, we have to be educated on what farming is all about. We have 2 universities, land grant colleges. You have UF and you have Florida A&M University. All the information that you could possibly need would be at those universities' websites. I don't know how many of you have checked it out, but it's something that you should be. And those are dollars that are paid by you for your knowledge. You can retrieve that money, or you can, and even the grants that they have to start at your church. That's a good start, having a church garden. And then it's a teaching moment. The children, teachers, the adults, we can all get together and make food healthy and fun. Right now, it's convenient, and nobody has the time to really grow a garden. Let's be real. Okay, and nobody's gonna go and grow a garden. How many gardeners do we have in here? How many have a tiller and gonna go out in the back at 90 degrees temperature and start picking the weeds out of your garden? Now, you're not gonna do it. You're gonna send Uber to pick your food up.
Uber Eats, right? Guilty. And just to dip a toe a little bit outside of the food system conversation where food security and education and gardening and farming, all of these things overlap, and I think access is another key issue. And access, meaning we're seeing working folks in our pantry who are working 2 and 3 jobs and do not have time to have a garden, between childcare and work, all of the different day-to-day pressures that people are experiencing. I think there's a lot of desire on the part of all of our neighbors of wanting to be able to afford and access local food and wanting, maybe to shop at the farmer's market or to learn more about gardening, but it's a time, economic sort of ROI that people have to run every day. And when we're in an environment where paychecks are just flat out not stretching far enough to afford the basics, the stressors of that day-to-day life make it really difficult to think about where is my food coming from and, how do I educate myself and my family? And so I think if we want to create a stronger local community food system and do all of the things that we aspire to, we have to address the broader economic pressures that our neighbors are experiencing so that people can engage with food in a different way.
Excellent. Definitely. Yes.
Quick reminder to just get, if you have any questions that you still want to ask that you have not written down, just raise your hand and we're going to collect those soon. Yeah, I love staying on this topic of as all of you are speaking, it just strikes me that it can be so overwhelming, I think, for the average person to just think about this system and think about, as with like recycling, all these things we learn about when we're young that just seems so big for any one person to tackle. If you could just name one thing that everyone here who left today could take with them or could think about or could research or could do tomorrow, what would it be?
So I'm going to steal mine. So there is a woman named Marion Nestle, and she is kind of the queen of food policy. And her whole career has been basically industry influence on the food system. So the way that largely looks is when you hear that blueberries are the new superfood and they're going to make your wrinkles go away, and you have that little research citation and you follow it and she follows it, and it turned out the blueberry industry funded this research, and that happens all the time. And so she basically just makes that comment and basically says that I think this should be more public. And ultimately, one of her claims is that food companies are not public health advocates, they are food companies. But she has this incredibly thick book. It's 20 years ago, she wrote a book called What to Eat, and it goes through, it's so overwhelming. And then she revisited it in the pandemic and spruced it up for today's time. So What to Eat Now is is the name of the book by Marion Nestle. And so she starts out by creating a framework that she kind of stole it from Michael Pollan. And let's see if I can get it right. Eat whole foods, mostly plants, not too much. And that's kind of what she says. And so you can still eat ice cream, right? That's, it's not saying avoid carbs, avoid fats, avoid all these things. It's saying eat whole foods, which I think that whole foods from the garden, from the farm, not too much. You can dress up a beet with goat cheese and make it more decadent than it needs to be. And then mostly plants would obviously, I think, is a quick comment about how we do eat a lot of beef and red meat in America.
That is so important that you say that. America, we had the best agricultural system in the world. We can starve nations by not shipping food. Cindy McCain is over the United Nations food policy. We can do this. It's just that we have not been trained to do it for ourselves. But those who control your food controls you. Bill Gates has 15,000 acres he's buying in Florida. He's putting greenhouses in. My dog will sit if I give him a doggy bone. My horse will come if he knows I'm going to feed him. Are we telling people this? Are we giving them food for them to come? I don't know. We don't want to get there. We don't want to go there, but let's be real. Those who control your food controls you. You're not going to go hungry. If you ever been hungry, you ain't going to want to be hungry no more. But let's think about it in that perspective. Who controls your food? Are you controlling your food? Are you controlling what you eat? Are you putting jars of food away like your grandparents used to do? Okay, I'm through.
I think one of the takeaways I would encourage everyone to walk away with, and I'm guessing by virtue of you all being in this room, this is probably already your set point, but I think that collectively we need to continue to challenge our assumptions about food security and what a person who visits a food pantry or seeks out food resources looks like. We really need to reduce the stereotype and the stigma around needing some help. We all need help sometimes. Neighbors helping neighbors is the fabric of community. And so really challenging the assumptions around maybe our thought process and stereotypes we may have about people who are seeking support at a food pantry or who are reaching out for help, at their church, or who need those resources, because that's going to prevent a lot of people who could benefit from food support and other services from reaching out to get that help. And so really normalizing that it's okay. We're all in a position sometimes to need some support. And so visiting, an organization like the Free Clinic or any other organization that provides necessary services is okay. Let's normalize that and reduce that stigma.
I think it's important to remember that you are what you eat has eaten. The other thing I tell kids is that in nature, according to the systems that have existed for millions of years, everybody's poop is somebody else's lunch. Yeah. And kids tend to understand that, and they remember it. So by thinking about it, they understand where their food comes from and the processes that take place in nature. We live in a society where we're disconnected from nature. Food comes from the supermarket, and it disappears when it magically appears in the supermarket. It magically disappears when you flush. It's impossible. There's a lot of things that happen before and after. I think that getting the kids to understand where their food comes from and the importance, the dependence on nature is absolutely critical. Every school should have a garden where kids can learn and experience this. Every school has a football field or, sports. They need to know where their food comes from.
Are there other resources that you guys haven't mentioned? If people in the audience want to get involved, want to form a nonprofit, want to start their own garden, are there resources that each of your organizations can provide that you would like people to know about?
Well, I know that FAMU or Florida A&M University have a
microphone.
Program. Oh gosh, boys carry a lot. Florida A&M University, we work closely with them. There's 3,800 acres of land that they own there in Brooksville. The land is loaned to farmers who are interested in becoming farmers or beginner farmers, a portion of that land that you're able to grow on. And that's research there too, as well as UF. UF also does a lot of research with their farm there in Gainesville. That's knowledge, and you can Google any of that, and you can find, and even with you, what you're doing there at Hillsborough County, get the information. Information is powerful, and there's lots of information out there. But you got to have information. And back to your point, we're not trying to get people hooked on free food. Hey, that's not what we're trying to do. And with the programs that you have, Erica, we have to teach them to be independent. Now, if there's a time that you would need to service, that's fine. But if you get food today, you should be able to do some kind of community service tomorrow.
So for in Hillsborough County, I'm going to say don't start a nonprofit. Join one of the many, many existing ones that are already out there and need volunteers. And so with the food system, growing, processing, distributing, marketing, consuming, recycling, all of that, it's not rocket science, but it does take persistence and consistency. And so what I hear a lot from my network partners is that they have a volunteer who watched a movie and shows up and says, I'm ready to transform the world. I want to volunteer in your urban farm, community garden, pantry, whatever. And then the person says, great, I need you to go do this task, and this is what that means, and here's how you do it. And maybe the task is like yucky or boring or hard or in the sun or, all of these different things. And then they pour time to train this person, and then they leave and they never come back. And so a lot of network partners in my network are kind of burned out by volunteers, but also they are critical. So if you're in Hillsborough County and you want to get involved in our community food system, then there is for sure an organization that's operating either in your neighborhood where you live or the neighborhood that you want to serve. I would encourage you to serve your neighborhood just because that helps build community. But one of the things that I kind of always like to tell my network partners is that everything's already been done for the most part, which is fine. Actually, that's kind of an advantage because then we can call those people and say, hey, what did you do and what did you learn from that and how much did it cost? And actually a great example is Homegrown Hillsborough a year or so ago, some people in the audience here, we took a field trip over to the St. Pete Free Clinic because they have a really cool program that is trying to help neighborhood stores, corner stores, convenience stores get more fresh, healthy produce in them. And so, Jen can talk about it more, but there are strategies such as helping them install a refrigerator so that way they can have perishable healthy items, or helping connect them to a distributor that can serve several convenience stores versus just one, because the reality is a distributor doesn't want to just serve one for $40. They want to serve 7 for $500. And so we took a field trip over to St. Pete and we asked literally those questions. What would you do differently if you did it over again? How much does it cost? How much staff time? And so there's always ways to learn from others, and there's always everything's already been done. We should learn from it. Join in the movement and work up to leadership if you want to kind of lead something. But ultimately, it's already going on in your neighborhood, and there is a way for you to actively get involved. If you're in Hillsborough County, you can just reach out to me, Monica@homegrownhillsborough.com, and I can dispatch you to the right place.
If you had a magic wand and you could fix any part of the food system that you think is broken right now, what would you do and why?
So my gut reaction to this question is almost always just economics, because at the end of the day, food access is a function of economics. So the term food desert is kind of on the rise. It's like the current billboard that a lot of people are learning about, tuning into. Because I've been in the space so long, I've been familiar with that word for such a long time. And there's actually a movement to stop calling it a food desert. So the technical term that researchers use is low income, low access. And if you live in a low income, low access neighborhood, then you live in a food desert. But the reason why the term food desert is trying to, or some advocates, activists are trying to reduce it is because when you think of a desert, you think of a barren wasteland, and you don't think of life, and you think of something that is maybe been abandoned or just kind of desolate, and that's not true for these communities. The reason why they don't have a grocery store is not because there aren't people that live there that have full lives. It's ultimately because a grocery store decided that market was not worth it. And so low income, low access, when both of those things are combined, that's ultimately what makes a community that is in a food desert. And so if the magic wand, we were to radically transform economics, that would go away. Grocery stores would go into these neighborhoods. These neighbors would have choice. They would also have probably more comfort in trying new things. I remember going when I was in college and trying a new recipe, printing it out, going to the grocery store, buying all the ingredients, buying all the equipment. Okay, so now I have a $60 shopping cart. I'm a broke college kid. I'm gonna try to make this meal. Oh, it kind of sucks. I guess I would just rather go get takeout. And that, I think, is kind of a common occurrence, that if you didn't have a grandmother teaching you how to cook, if it's not a natural language you speak, then it's actually something you have to like overcome and practice. And that's expensive. That requires time, that requires equipment, that requires refrigeration. And so economics is largely it. But I also will say a huge piece in specifically Florida's food system, world is land. We have historically been a big ag state, and we still are, but in Hillsborough County, Pinellas, it's developed, right? There's no real land here, although Emmanuel does have a cool stat about some urban land. But Hillsborough County, we still do have agricultural land, Pasco County, Hernando County, Citrus County. But every day I see a new headline about how, Lakeland is the fastest growing. And so if you have Hillsborough going east and Lakeland growing west, that's where the farmland is. And so land is a sticky question.
Jen, do you have a magic wand answer?
Mm-hmm. Monica took my answer. I would just echo it. I think, we have to address the economy and the affordability of food and create more access are the two magic wands.
I would get our policy makers make an inventory of all the available land, and I would start with the churches. I have done a survey, and within the Tampa Bay area, I believe that there is between 1,500 and 3,000 acres of available land. That is a quarter of an acre here, 7 acres there, little pieces, but the aggregate is a huge amount. And when you think that an acre can produce 20,000 pounds of produce, you're starting to get to some pretty high numbers. And to reach those $200 million that I was talking about earlier, it is not impossible. We just need to convince the policymakers to look at it as an economic low-hanging fruit. And a local food system comes with considerable dividends that are health, education, social interaction, because food brings people together. And those are very tangible things. And I can assure you that the farmer that is in Central Valley in California that grows 150 acres of broccoli doesn't give a hoot about the health and educational and social impact of his broccolis, because he cannot. On the other hand, the farmers that are in the community interact with the consumers, and so that's how I would use my magic wand. And even I don't have one, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I love it. Howard, do you have anything to?
Yes, I would create ag communities, just whole developments that are ag-related developments. When you move into the development, you'll have your agriculture farms, you have your agricultural store in those communities, and that's a start. But we have to start somewhere. If we continue the road that we're going down now, we're going to get the same results that we've already gotten. We can change the trajectory of things if we would put our mind on healthy eating. You got to think healthy. You cannot continue to go like we're going. It's not going to benefit us if we don't eat healthy. You say, well, eating healthy is expensive. To some degree it is. But if you're growing your own food, again, I go back to that as a farmer, you got to grow. Even if it's just a tomato plant on your patio. Start there. You may have a green thumb and don't even know it. Most people, they really don't know. The thing is, they overkill their plant. They love them to death. Leave the plant alone. The 200-year-old tree didn't ask for your help. Just leave it alone. Just give it what it needs, a little sunlight and water, and let it grow. And then you'll see just how it can happen. But I will start the ag communities where the whole development will have ag-related stores in the development.
4 great answers. Thanks, guys. I think we're going to move to the questions from the audience now. First one is, South St. Pete neighborhoods want more local produce stores. How can we get more and high-quality groceries/produce into our neighborhoods? Who would like to take that?
I'll go ahead and plug One Community Co-op. I think that they've been doing this work for a really long time. Since I moved to Tampa Bay, they've been out there. And so ultimately, like I was talking about earlier, unfortunately, South St. Pete is one of those low-income, low-access neighborhoods. And so from what I recall, Tangerine Plaza has tried to attract grocers. There maybe was one that left. And what I've seen across the nation is that begging a grocery store to be in a neighborhood and throwing tax incentives or even just dollars at it actually rarely works. They usually fulfill their contract and then they bail. And so to build long-term infrastructure, it is through something like a co-op. A co-op is hard to start. There is a process and it takes literal buy-in, and you have to have enough members in order to split the costs of having infrastructure. But when they happen, they have a really long, successful trajectory. So the juice is worth the squeeze, but it can be a hard squeeze. And so for South St. Pete, I'm just going to say, join your local co-op.
And a program that's already in place that the Free Clean, Monica referenced it, but that we're really proud of, that we're executing in partnership with the City of St. Petersburg, is what we call our Fresh Pace program, which is building on the existing infrastructure in the community, understanding that many areas of our city, including many areas of South St. Pete, are a food desert, low access, low income. And so it's working with existing stores where people are already shopping, that are convenient for people to get to when they're going there because they can get there. But there's not a lot of healthy food there, and also the prices are marked up, so it's not affordable. And so in working with store owners, we have 7 stores right now in the South St. Pete CRA that are a part of this program. And essentially what these stores have is a whole mix of healthy offerings, everything from, frozen broccoli to fresh lettuce to healthy proteins. It's a whole Fresh Pace section. The store owners are required to carry certain Fresh Pace items. They have to meet certain nutritional content. We work with them monthly on that to make sure that that's what's happening. They have to price it at or below a certain level, and it cannot be more than what somebody may go to, a big box, larger grocery store to access in another area. And so those prices have to be comparable and affordable. And in that way, that we're seeing just a lot of uptake at these local businesses. One of the things that we thought would happen, which is proving to be true, is that even though it can take some ramp up of infrastructure, it's a lot of work to get it going, what we're finding is that the store owners and the business owners are seeing increased customer traffic and people just purchasing more in their store in general. And so they are benefiting from having more customer traffic. Folks are benefiting from having more options in their local community where they're already going. And so this is just an example of building, again, on that local infrastructure. We can't wait for the big grocery stores to come in because that's often not on the horizon. And so we have to make things happen with what we have going on already.
And also in their stores, they have, or at least the one I went to, they have recipe cards. And so you can grab some frozen broccoli and some fresh lettuce and some, cheese, and then go over and find a recipe, or actually probably start with the recipe card, go pick your ingredients. I don't cook, you can probably tell. And so that is a big part, and that's actually part of that food system approach. And so distribution is having it available where you are, but then consumption, processing and consumption both are, okay, now convert it into a meal that you'll enjoy, your kids will enjoy, that will reward your body, provide health benefits, which is why the food system model through all 6 of those sectors is so important, because I think by and large, if we were to go give a basket of produce to every single person in Florida, I would be interested to see how many people actually know how to take a basket of produce and turn that into something yummy that they want to eat. I wouldn't know, and I am in this space. I am Googling, I am learning how to blanch stuff, I am, buying different peelers for different things. I'm always forgetting what temperature do I make the beets and for how long, and I have the ability to get my laptop out and search those things and listen to my music while I do it. But somebody that's in a economic crisis or in a home where they're sharing it with lots of people might not have that same luxury. So the food system approach to say, cool, here's some fruits and vegetables, perishable, fresh food plus a recipe card. Plus, ideally, the next thing would be a potluck to have that community, and so you can build off of it.
Next question, what does a good, successful community food system look like? How would you define actual success? Manuel?
Creating more farms, urban and peri-urban farms. And to go back to the question that you just asked, that you asked before, in the case of St. Petersburg and South St. Petersburg in particular, there was a lot, every house until the Second World War had a garden in the backyard. It was not because it was cool, it was because it was a necessity. Nowadays, I think we're going to have to go back to that for economic reasons. And once we have that, then we can have more urban farmers that will that will grow more vegetables, that will be affordable. Also, you cannot have a system that is very efficient, but that does not serve the needs of everybody to fix that problem. So we need to find distribution systems that are parallel to it. And I'm part of USF, a Future of Food, and I've made some proposals for distribution systems that are parallel to the existing, to the supermarket, which is as simple as a bus, as a school bus that goes around the neighborhoods. So we need to think creatively and address the needs of the people who we are trying to serve.
Yes, that's an interesting question that you ask there. The infrastructure, the food desert, food insecurity, those are real concerns that we should have. Getting food to the individual in a time that is usable and fresh, not just getting something there because it's food. You want wholesome food, and sometimes we forget about wholesome food, just getting something to eat. Kid gets off of the school bus, he goes into a convenience store, he gets a soda and maybe a bag of chips. And this is what he does. He doesn't come home to an apple and an orange in these communities. So now it's a teaching moment, and it starts at the school. Some kids love to go to school to eat. See, we got to look beyond what we are used to. There are kids that go to school because they eat at school. We have that in our neighborhoods. So how do we address that as it relates to what's in the neighborhood? The stores that advertise beer, cigarettes, and at a convenience store, the kid goes there, that's what he sees. That's what he grows up to. What can the city, or what can we do to offset that type of thinking, that type of behavior? Because it's going to affect him in the classroom. I've seen it. When he sits in that classroom and his stomach is hungry, he's not going to pay any attention to no algebra. He's thinking about eating another meal. So that's a group, and this is social economics here. We're talking about economics. We're talking about those who have maybe an income of less than $20,000 a year. That group of people, where are they? They're going to be you. They come into you, most of them. Not all of them. There are people who make bigger income than that, but that's what you receive when you come to your pantry. That's what they want. They don't have food. So how do we offset that? You're talking about bringing in grocers. Grocers not going to come into those neighborhoods. Publix is not going to do that. Publix is going to set up what the new development is, because it's affordable to those people. They can go to Publix, but not that kid that is in an area where there's food insecurity. They're not going to do that. They go to the corner store and live out of the store.
Well, and just to clarify, we are serving folks who are on the very, lower income side of things. But for those of you who follow the ALICE reports, asset limited income constrained employed, that population of individuals comprises 47% of Pinellas County, which means that population of folks, nearly half of our neighbors in Pinellas County cannot afford the basics, including food. And so those are the folks that are coming to us. It is people who are working 2 and 3 jobs, doing everything they're supposed to do, trying to educate their children, trying to stay on top of everything, but the math does not work out. People are not earning enough money to afford the basics, which is where we come in. And so again, I think it's really important that we reduce the stigma around what it means to access a food pantry, what it means to have to access a corner store because there are no other options in a neighborhood, which is again why we really prioritize building on that existing infrastructure and working with what we have, because it's what we have to work with, and we want to create those access points for all of our neighbors.
It's a good segue to the next question. I taught in Korea for 2 years. There I experienced the best cafeteria food I've ever had. How do we get local fresh foods into our public schools? Tastes and preferences will only change when the next generation is exposed early.
Yes, that's a good one. We have a contract with the school systems now in Jacksonville. That's a good one. You have companies like Chartwell. Some of you might have Chartwells here. Major food companies, and we work under them to bring food to the schools. And we've worked with them for years now, and they are privately owned. They have contracts and grants that they get from the USDA in order to provide healthy food to the community. That's fine during the school year, but what happens after school is out? That's a big problem. And Chartwell usually don't serve kids when school is out. They have to find other means of food. And again, it comes back to food banks. For most of these kids who have been eating free and reduced lunches, that's part of the USDA as well. So when you think on those terms, what can be done if the churches are not doing it? Who else? What other nonprofit agency is going to foot the bill?
And I think that really is a policy issue too. One of the things we saw during COVID, a lot of kids were not physically in school, but this lasted for a couple of years, is schools took away the income requirements for free and reduced lunch. And so every child who just showed up in the cafeteria could access a meal. And again, what it did was it kind of reduced that stigma around having the card or the thing that was going to identify that child as a child who was on free and reduced lunch, and leveled that playing field. So you could just show up if you needed food, the child could eat, no questions asked, and it really increased food access. And then of course, as we kind of, got out of the pandemic, those rules got back in place, and now we're actually seeing a rollback of available food in schools and during the summer in the state. And so that, in terms of, and I don't have an answer for like how to fix that, but I do know it's a policy issue in large part of really advocating to make sure our policymakers know that there's a gap there and that kids are not eating enough in school where meals could be provided, and that the food doesn't have the nutritional content necessarily that we would want it to have.
Yeah, I it's policy and it's economics. I'm lucky that in our network, we actually work with the food service director for Hillsborough County Public Schools. And so she is tasked with making the menus and ordering the food for Hillsborough County is the 8th largest school district in the nation. And so she likes to say that they are the largest restaurant in the county, and that's true. In Hillsborough County, we actually do have summer feeding programs where most schools are open for those summer feeding programs. And I can see in the back, one community co-op has something to promote too. And so, that is a huge gap that is being met. I think that counties do have to opt into it. And the state, I think, is getting more restrictive all the time with dollars that they help for districts to cover. So I think like on an average, school meals are supposed to be like $1.14 each per kid. And I bet you in Korea it was different.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Emmanuel, you've referenced this a couple times. I'm hoping you can elaborate a bit. The question is the soil our produce grown in of good quality, or is it stripped of the nutrients we need? I think we know that a lot of it is. How do we get to a place of better soil?
Well, Soil is alive, dirt is dead. The difference between the two is that one is full of organic matter that is being decomposed by the microorganisms, and it is full of microorganisms. In 1 tablespoon of healthy soil, there are more bacteria than there are humans on Earth. Okay? So take care of the microbes. The microorganisms are the silent workers. Just like in human society, you take care of your workers, you feed them, you reward them, they'll give it back to you 100 times. So the soil has to be respected, has to be nurtured, and then you'll grow healthy food.
Yeah, that's a good point there. The organic matter is most necessary for the soils, and you can amend your soils. But now with precision farming, hydroponic farming is the key now. I can grow more things in a 2-acre greenhouse than my granddad could grow on 20 acres through precise and precision farming. Hydroponically, using no soil whatsoever, just feeding nutrients through the water. And that has become very popular because it requires less space. And I think a lot of the restaurants are going to that now. They're contracting with high tunnel growers and greenhouse growers to grow their fresh lettuce just hydroponically.
And sorry.
I would like to say something about that. Hydroponics. There is a lot of tech and major companies that invested in hydroponic systems and aeroponics, and they poured billions of dollars. And what I find rather comforting is that they're all going out of business. And I won't eat hydroponic produce any more than I take a swig when I go and fill up my car. Because I don't drink petroleum and I don't eat petroleum. And if you ask hydroponic companies what nutrients do they give to their plants, it is all petroleum based. So it's a matter of personal choice.
Yeah, and we could go on with this here because when you think about the oil companies, you're thinking about the chemical companies, you think about your plastic, and you think about the petroleum company who controls all of that. The plastics are here, it's in the soil, it's in your bodies as we talk. Just particles of plastic. So when you think on those terms, we have to come up with a way that we can avoid the plastics, especially from the petroleum company who controls the oils. So that's a lot there. But I agree. I like the stuff that comes out of the dirt too. I really do. But it's not always that convenient.
And so I will just quickly do a plug for UFIFS Extension. Wherever you are, you have one in your county, and you can take your soil and get a soil sample. You can do $5 at your local extension office, or you can send it to Gainesville at the big university lab for $10. The $10 one gets you pages and pages and pages of information about what's in your soil. From what I understand, Florida has sandy soil, which makes it hard for nutrients to hang around. It just washes off. So there are things that you can do. That extension can teach you how to create soil that will absorb water and also nutrients. But the first step is, if you want to grow your own food, and I hope that you do, take a little scoop of your soil into your local extension office and they'll get you started.
That's fascinating. Similar theme, how can locally grown crops, like if someone wanted to start their own garden in their yard, be protected from pesticides and spraying, for mosquitoes from airplanes I hear flying overhead all the time?
Well, in nature, everything tends to be balanced, but they are never in balance. So you'll have the pest, you'll have preys and predators. And one time you'll have too many preys, and sometimes you'll have too many predators. You notice the preys, you don't go. And to think that companies recommend that you spray all your crops with a chemical to get rid of the pest correspond to having somebody run for mayor And after the day after being elected on the platform of eliminating all criminals, and the day after being elected, would call the chief of police and say, look, you're going to go around and kill absolutely everybody and save the last bullet for yourself, because I promised that we would get rid of all the criminals, but at the same time you kill everybody. So what is acceptable in the garden is absolutely absurd in human society. But it's the same thing. So what you need is biodiversity. Accept that there may be a hole here and there in one of your leaf of lettuce, but you have to understand the cycles of nature and how to work with nature, not against nature. And our future, the future of humanity, depends on it.
And for the person that asked that question, you can search integrated pest management and companion planting. Those are going to get you the resources that you want.
Yeah, you're exactly right. If I don't see a hole in my collard greens, I won't eat them. It's too perfect. The apple is too perfect. You know, I need a little hole in it. If the insects can stand the chemicals, I can.
Great point. Big agriculture has led to a loss of most varieties of produce and left us with species that are a monoculture and with far fewer nutrients. Can small farms help us get back those varieties and nutrient density that we have lost?
Wow. Seeds. We haven't gone there.
Yeah.
Monsanto controls the seed markets now. You can't hardly find seeds that we used to. That's crucial. Where do you get your seeds if you're not saving your seeds? Some of the seeds are not true to what you're eating. They won't come back true. If you plant a corn seed, it may not come back as you think because it's been modified. It's just like the seedless watermelons. Chromosomes have been changed in that watermelons in order to get seedless watermelon. But seeds have always been something that we've eaten. From pea seeds to any other seeds. Seeds are most nutritious. But when we don't have that, then we don't have a way of sustaining that variety of food that we once did. So again, these big companies are controlling your seeds now. Ask any of your big farmers when you're trying to go and plant soybeans. They already are modified to kill weeds in there, the glyphosate, that's caused cancer. So that's a lot there that we have to be very careful of when we're eating our foods and knowing a little bit more about it. Yeah.
And so not only should small farms use heirloom varieties, but I think that they must, because it provides a new item on the market that somebody is not getting in a grocery store. So it kind of already has a little built-in consumer demand, because if anybody here has had an heirloom variety tomato versus the tomato you get in Publix, you know that it looks different, tastes different. You can decide whether it's better or worse. Maybe you like a watery tomato. But that is, to me, where I think that these small farms actually can differentiate themselves from the food system. At the end of the day, something we haven't talked about, which may be a future conversation, is that local food is more expensive. You can get to a point where it can maybe be comparable, but local food is generally more expensive. And so in order to kind of justify to your buyer why it's more expensive, labor is obviously a huge part. But like I said earlier, economies of scale is a real thing. And so if you are a tomato grower and you are growing thousands of tomato plants, you want those all to be uniform, so that way your buyers all know what they're getting, versus local growers, small growers, they don't need the same uniformity because they're having conversations with their buyers directly, or their buyers are coming to them because they're looking for this. So heirloom varieties also you generally do better in your area. So there are seed varieties that do better here in Florida than they would in South Carolina, just because they seed saving over time. Those genetics, those advantageous genetics stay. You save those seeds and you keep going.
I'd like to point out something, about Roundup. A lot of people are gluten sensitive in America. There are very few people in Europe that are. In America, 10 days before harvesting the wheat, farmers spray a Roundup on the wheat so that it kills the plant, and they'll get a better yield because they'll get the maximum, the grains will come out of the chaff more easily. So when Monsanto says, well, glyphosate and Roundup does not affect the human body, they're right. It does not directly. So when the residue of that Roundup end up inevitably on the outer part of the wheat and that it is turned into flour, Roundup acts as an antibiotic, and that ruins your gut microbiome. And this is the reason why in America there is a lot more gluten sensitivity, because you do not have the right microbiome, while in Europe that usage of glyphosate and Roundup is forbidden. And I know a lot of people who go say, yeah, in France or in Europe, I had no problem eating bread, but here I do. So this is one of the perverse techniques that are being used to increase yields, but at the detriment of health. And I think the only way we can change that is by mentioning, the education and starting with children, because it is through the children that you reach the parents.
I'm realizing I have no idea what time it is or any way to tell. Does anyone have the time? Okay, my spidey senses were tingling. All right, I think we're going to wrap it there. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thanks to let's give a round of applause for our panelists, please. Thank you to our sponsor, Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg, for the support and for hosting us at the Center for Health Equity. We've recorded this event, and a link to that recording will be emailed to all participants following the program. We're also going to be sending you a brief survey. Mark your calendars for July 16th, which is our next Spotlight Tampa Bay, moderated by Times Environment reporter Jack Prater. We hope you'll join us at the Palladium for Rising Seas, Shifting Neighborhoods, How Climate Change is Affecting Real Estate and Housing in Tampa Bay.